Hello and welcome to Upstack America's Oracle EBS Financials Functional Training. My name is Bob and I'm the lead senior consultant for Upstack America. And with me today I have Victor, who is also a senior consultant. And today we are handling lesson 15 of accounts payables. And Victor, please walk us through.
Thank you, Bob, for the introduction, and welcome everybody to this lesson in our Oracle Financials Functional Training series. We are still looking at the payment process, which we started in our previous lesson. In our previous lesson, we looked at what scheduled payments are, and we talked about the fact that they are created immediately. We enter an invoice and validate it in AP. We briefly looked at the payment process, and we're going to continue from there. So in this session, we are going. It's going to be good. We are going to learn that part of the payment process is actually handled by the Oracle module, Oracle Payments. So actually what we say is that the Oracle Payments module handles the funds disbursement and funds capturing processes in the Oracle suite of applications. So what this means is that this Oracle Payments module works very closely with other modules such as payables and also receivables because of these parts, funds capturing. So in payments, we can do many setups and configurations that are related to these two processes of disbursement and capturing of funds. However, that does not mean that payables does not have its functions. As we have said, they work closely together. And in this part of the payment process, we know that we use payables to do invoice selection and invoice approval. This means it is in payables where you do a selection of invoices that are going to be paid and also approving the invoices that are going to be paid. And as we're going to see, actually, Oracle Payments only takes over after payables has, in payables, you have gone to the part up to where you have selected the scheduled payments that are going now for further processing to be paid to the suppliers. So this is something good to know. Various companies can have different setups whereby maybe the payments is being done in a centralized way. We have people who are using Oracle Payments. So the funds disbursement and capturing is being handled by a centralized group of people, or you can have your payables users handling the whole process and your receivables users handling the whole process. Okay, so you can have different setups depending on the client for whom the implementation is being done. But for us right now, we are focusing on Oracle AP and how it falls into this whole process. But you're also going to see when we are doing some of the setups that the screens we are going to be using are going to be owned by Oracle Payments, while others are going to be owned by Oracle Payables. So take note of those little features, which is important stuff to know. So we looked at this diagram in our previous session, at least a version of it. The previous one we had got only up to this payment instruction part. So I added this instruction file part It's not a very big difference. So we just want so that as we are studying this process, we can have a much clearer understanding of what each segment is. So we have just said that Oracle Payables handles this process up to the part where it becomes a selected payment. So if we would want to draw a boundary in this process between Oracle Payables and Oracle Payments, the boundary would be around here between selected payment and payment instruction. So we can say that from payment from selected payment going onward, that part is handled by Oracle Payments. Well, from invoice to selected payment, then this process is handled by Oracle Payables. So we are just going to look at all these features again in a step-to-step manner in light of this new information, see how they are related to each other, and so that we can have a better understanding of this whole process. So we already know what an invoice is. An invoice is a document that is sent to you from the supplier, indicating the goods and services that were provided and the payment terms indicated and other information. So once an invoice is received, the invoice is captured in AP, where you capture all those details. And once the invoice is validated, then a scheduled payment is created. We know that the scheduled payment is created based on the payment terms and the term date basis. So the term date basis plus the length of days or how the payment terms have been defined determines the number of scheduled payments that are going to be created. So for example, in invoice 2, we can say that the payment terms had 3 lines. Okay, and that is why 3 scheduled payments were created. So maybe all these 3 scheduled payments they have perhaps they have different due dates based on the number of lines that were created in the terms that were used for this invoice. So how do we go from scheduled payment to selected payment? So when we are doing a pay run, we will have various criteria that are used to pick which scheduled payments should be selected to go and be paid. All right. So maybe we can use something like the vendor to which these payments are being made, or the due dates, the range of dates that are on these scheduled payments. So maybe scheduled payments that have a due date that falls in a certain range will be selected. Okay. So based on those criteria, then we will have payments which will be selected and others which won't be selected. So for instance, in this example, we can say that scheduled payment 2 did not meet the criteria, so it was not selected. So scheduled payment 1, 3, and 4 were selected, and they became selected payment 1, 2, and 3. Right? So up to that point, we are doing all these processes in payables. Okay. So now once we have the selected payments, then we go now into the Oracle payments world, right? So there's a couple of things, differences in terms of terminology. So in Oracle payables, you can call this scheduled. We can call these scheduled payments, the ones that are created once you enter the invoice. But when you're in payments, Oracle payments, they are called documents payable. Okay. So that's one difference. When we're talking about the payments that are going to be made, we can call them documents. We call them documents payable when we are dealing in Oracle payments. So from the selected payments, a payment instruction is created, right? So, I mean, to avoid confusion, we could just take off this instruction word here and just call it payment. Okay. So, I mean, that's just to avoid, these terms might be a bit confusing when you're wondering what is what. So you can just think of this as payment. So just remove this instruction term here and you can call this payment 1, payment 2, and payment 3. So, and you can see the relation between the selected payments and the payment instruction. So, for example, here you can see that selected payment 2 and payment 3 have been grouped into one payment instruction. Reason being, they might or have been grouped into one payment. Reason being is that they might have been said they are going to the same vendor, right? So there is no reason for you to write maybe like 2 checks and they are just all going to the same vendor. And for whatever reasons, you can also decide to split a payment into 2. Maybe you can see that once we go to the next step. So once you do a payment, then the system generates what is called an instruction file. So basically, an instruction file, we can say it's the last step of the process. An instruction file can be now the check that has been printed, all right? So once you do your payment, you'll have maybe a blank checklist sitting somewhere in the printer. So the instruction file is whatever is sent to be printed on that checklist, which maybe it will have the name of the vendor and the amounts that are going to be paid to that vendor. You can have different instruction files. So for instance, the reason why we can have this payment 2 and this payment 3 going to the same instruction file is because this instruction file could be a check, while this instruction file here could be an electronic payment that has been produced. So that instruction file for electronic payment, maybe it's something that goes straight electronically to the bank to instruct you now you can transfer these funds to whoever is listed in that instruction file. So that's the meaning of the instruction file, and that is a reason why we can have payments being grouped into a single instruction file, and so on. So that is basically an overview of the payment process. Points to remember is that this part of the payment process is handled by the Oracle payments module, which is basically the funds disbursement part of the payment process. And here, which basically involves invoice entry, validation, selection, and approval. This part is handled by AP. The other thing to note is the number relations between each of these segments. What do I mean? When I say that, I mean the way that you can have, for example, a selected payment being split into two, or selected payments being grouped into one payment instruction. Why is it important to know that? Because those groupings are determined by something that we are going to talk about soon, which is called the payment process profile. All right. So these are things which you can control, these groupings, and you control them through the payment process profile, which we are going to cover soon. So it's good to have an understanding of what each of these terms and stages mean, and the various implications. So there's also just two more things that I want us to have an understanding of, because they are also determined by the payment process profiles that we create. So one is remittance advice. So what is a remittance advice? Remittance advice is basically like a letter or a notice that you send to the supplier, telling them that you have made payment on a particular invoice that they sent you. So, for example, if you are writing this supplier a check, right? So you'll print the check, and then on that check, you will also attach a remittance advice and send them together with the check to the supplier. So that remittance advice will perhaps show that this payment is for this particular invoice. And this is usually done as a courtesy to the supplier, so it's not mandatory. So it's just a courtesy, and what it does is it helps the receivables department of that particular supplier to match their payments to invoices, which is good for reconciliation. So once they get paid, they can compare that payment to the invoice, and then it will be good for their reconciliation. So this is not a mandatory document. It's just something that you can send to the supplier. So the reason we are talking about this is that you can also configure the system to produce a remittance advice once your payment instruction has been created. And you can also determine things such as the format of that remittance advice that is produced by the system. So these are things you can configure in your payment process profile. The other thing that we also need to know is this thing called the positive pay file, which is also something that you can configure in your payment process profile. So what does this do? So positive pay file is produced through a service whereby a company shares its checks register with the bank. So what this means is that the bank has the list of all the check leaves that your company is going to be using. So maybe it knows that you have a certain check stock, and it has 1,000 leaves, okay? And the numbers on those particular leaves. So what happens is that the bank will be able to know if a leaf that's sent to them asking them to make this payment does not belong to your stock of registered checks. And that way the bank will be able to prevent fraud, because you don't want them paying checks which you are not the one who has actually written. So this is just a service that is used by companies to prevent fraud, to prevent people from making invalid claims on the company. This is, as we have said, this is also something that you can determine whether it's produced or is used by making some configurations in the system through the payment process profile. So we have understood a basic overview of the payment process. Now, the next thing we are going to look at is the payment process profile and how it affects some of these features that we have discussed in this payment process. However, we are going to do that in our next session. So Bob, unless you have something to add, that's a good place to end this session.
You're good. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.